This question appeared on a video which explains how to paste Excel data into existing text boxes in PowerPoint. And what this viewer wants to know is basically how to repeat that process in order to create one slide for every row in an Excel table. So to demonstrate that, I've got a couple of basic files set up, a simple PowerPoint presentation and an Excel workbook containing some data. The data we're going to paste is in a list of the top 50 highest grossing movies, so ultimately we want to create one slide for every one of these films. The PowerPoint presentation itself is very much nothing special. It's got a single slide in it, which is going to act as our template slide. And there are 5 text boxes on there. The main title text box, which is going to receive the film name. Then text box number 2 is just a label. Text box number 3 will accept the worldwide gross figure. Text box number 4 is a label. And then text box number 5 will receive the year the film was released in. So I'll just close down that PowerPoint presentation for the time being. I don't need it open any longer. In terms of the setup of the Excel workbook, I've just copy-pasted this list from Wikipedia. I'll drop a link in the video description so you can download these files yourself and follow along if you'd like to. In terms of the VB editor, I've created a module and a simple subroutine, and I've already set up a reference to the Microsoft PowerPoint object library. So you can see that one's already been checked there. So that's the basic setup. Let's write some code to get this started. Let's start by declaring some variables to deal with the various PowerPoint objects we'll need. So I'm going to start with dim ppt as PowerPoint.application, and then dim pres as PowerPoint.presentation, and finally dim sld as PowerPoint.slide. Now I want to create a new instance of the PowerPoint application, so I can set ppt equals new PowerPoint.application, and then I want to create a new presentation based upon the presentation file I've got saved in the same folder as this Excel workbook. I don't just want to open up that specific file and make changes to it. I want to use this file more like a template. So what I'm going to do is say setPres equals ppt.presentations.open, and then I'm going to construct the file path to the file I want to open. I'm going to say this workbook.path, and then concatenate that with the /mypresentation.pptx. And then I'm going to move on to the untitled parameter of this open method by typing a couple of commas to skip onto the untitled parameter. I'm going to say MSO true, which will mean that it's not going to open up the my presentation pptx file. It's going to open up a new file using the content of my presentation, so basically using that as a template. So at that point, I'm just going to quickly run that code just to prove that I get a new PowerPoint presentation, but it's not my presentation that's opened, it's a new untitled one. Let's just close that down, and then we'll have a look at how to deal with a slide. Now I want to use the slide that exists in that presentation as a template for each of the films in our list. So again, I don't want to modify the existing slide, I want to make a copy of that one and then modify the copy. One way to do that is to use the duplicate method of the slide object. So I can refer to the first slide in my presentation by saying pres.slides1. I know when I open up the presentation there's only one slide in it to begin with, and then I can apply the duplicate method to create a copy of that one, including all the objects on it. So if I were to just run that one just to quickly check what I get, there we go, I've got my duplicated slide, which happens to become slide number 2. Now, in order to make changes to the copied slide, it will help if I can get a reference to that slide that's just been duplicated. So I'm just going to close down that instance of the presentation. And then if we look at what the duplicate method returns, if I click at the end of the duplicate method and press Ctrl-I for information, it returns a reference to something called a slide range. It's possible to apply the duplicate method to multiple slides at the same time and return a range of slides as a result. I know that I'm only going to be duplicating a single slide, so what I'm going to do is use the duplicate method and indicate that I want to return the first item in the slide range, and that will return a reference to a slide object. So now that I've done that, I can use my slide variable. I can say set sld equals pres.slides1.duplicate and then return the reference to the first item in the duplicated slide range. This now means I've got an easy way to reference the slide and the shapes on it. So what I'm going to do now is set the text of 3 text boxes equal to values of some specific cells. So what I'm going to do is just use a with block to refer to range A2 on my worksheet worksheet. So I'm going to assume that I've already got this worksheet active on screen, so I'm going to enter the details for avatar into this first slide we've duplicated. So to do that, I'm going to say sld.shapes, and I know that the first shape is the main title text box at the top, and then I'm going to refer to the text frame 2.textRange.text and make that equal to the text property of that range. Then I'm just going to quickly copy and paste that line because it's pointless writing it all out again. And I'm going to refer to shapes number 3. And then I'm going to set the text of that shape to be equal to the .offset 0,1. So the value of the cell, or the text of the cell that's one column to the right of range A2. And then once again, I'm going to quickly copy and paste that. And then set that to offset number 2 and slide or shape number 5. I'll add in my end width block. And then if we were to quickly execute that subroutine, just to quickly check that that one works for just a single film, we can see that slide number 2 has the details for avatar entered into it. So let's close down that instance of the presentation, and then we can have a look at how to get that code to loop to do the same thing for each film in our list. So getting this code to repeat once for each row in our table is probably the easiest part of the entire process. We've so many videos where we need to loop through a range of cells. So for this example, I'm going to do it using a for each loop, which means I'm going to need to declare a variable which can hold a reference to a range object. So I'll call mine RNG. And then after we've created our new presentation, but before we start creating duplicates of our slide, I want to begin my for each loop by saying for each RNG, and I'm going to say in range A2, range A2 dot end XL down. Lots of other techniques are available for looping through a range of cells, and you can pick your favorite from the videos we've created previously. This one just ensures that we loop through everything from cell A2 down to whichever cell happens to sit at the bottom of the list. So in this case, cell A51. It assumes that we're already on the correct worksheet when we execute the code. So that's a fairly safe assumption to make in a workbook that's only got one worksheet in it. And then I want to make sure that in my with block, I'm not referring explicitly to range A2. I'm going to refer to my RNG variable. Then I'm going to highlight and indent all of the code that sits below my for each loop, and then close it by saying next RNG. So at that point, if we were to execute our subroutine, we ought to end up with a presentation which ultimately ends up with 51 slides in it altogether, including our original template, but we get one slide for each of the rows in our table. There are several things we could do just to tidy up the results. So for example, we could delete the original slide template once we've finished duplicating it. We could change the order of the slides so that they appear in the order of the list from Excel. The problem is that when we duplicate a slide, it appears immediately after the one that's been duplicated, so we can solve that. We could of course save the presentation and then close down PowerPoint as well, all of part of our code. These are all the sorts of basic bells and whistles we can just add on at our convenience. So let's deal with the order of the slides first of all. So once I've created my new slide or duplicated it, I'm going to say sld.move2, and I want to move it to a position which is basically the slide number. So I want to move the slide to be at position that's equal to the number of slides in the entire presentation. So I can do that by saying sld.move2 pres.slides.count. Right at the end of my code, if I wanted to delete my original slide, I could say the pres.slides1, and unsurprisingly, I can apply the delete method to that to remove it. If I wanted to save the presentation at the end and maybe save that in the same folder as this workbook, I can say pres.saveas. And then let's provide a file name for it. I'll say this workbook.path, and then concatenate to the end of that a backslash, and what should we call it? Film presentation or something like that. And then of course we can close down the presentation and in fact close down PowerPoint altogether at that point. Let's say ppt.quit, which will both quit from PowerPoint and of course close down any open presentations in it. So with those few basic tweaks, let's have another quick test of that code. We'll end up with a new presentation, And eventually, once it's finished, it'll close down PowerPoint completely. We should have ended up with a new film presentation just created just now. And if I just double click to open that up, we should find that Avatar is the first slide, followed by Avengers, so it now matches the order of the slides or order of the films in my list. And of course, the first template slide has disappeared as well. So plenty of scope for making things a little more slick and streamlined. I'll leave the rest up to you, but hopefully that's enough to answer the original question. I think it is. If not, feel free to ask more questions and I'll see what I can do about answering them. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time.